What's up everyone, Zach Seif here, and today we're going to be talking about how you can best prepare for your next gig. So today's video is going to be a little bit more insightful and more of like a behind the scenes. I want to explain how I prepare for all these different gigs that you guys see me do on a regular basis. Over the past decade or so, I've been in no less than a dozen bands. I've done a couple dozen musical theater gigs, private shows, jazz gigs, cocktail hours, all that kind of stuff. And every single one of those gigs requires a different amount of attention paid to the detail, and the way that I prepare for those shows, everything is different. So I'm going to break down exactly how I think about what I'm going to do, what gear I'm going to bring, and how I'm going to present myself for each of these gigs. And hopefully it can give all of you a little bit of insight as to how you can prepare for the next gig that you have. So what kind of background do I have gigging? For those of you who don't know, I've been in a plethora of different cover bands, local bands. I've opened for national touring acts before. I've played casinos, nightclubs, bars. I've also done weddings, private events, jazz and cocktail hour events. I have also done a couple dozen musical theater and Broadway style showcases. And now I am currently in an agency cover band that plays 50 to 100 shows a year. So over the last half decade or so, I've played no less than 200 shows up and down the East Coast of the United States. So this brings me to my first and most important point, and that is choosing the right gear for the job. Now, some of you may say, well, I'm just gonna bring out my best guitar and my best amp to the show, or, oh, I'm gonna pick my favorite guitar, my favorite amp to bring to the show. Well, that might not necessarily always be the best idea depending on the gig that you have. You really have to consider a handful of factors before you just grab what you're used to grabbing before you say yes or take a gig. First thing that you should do is consider what type of music it is that you are playing and what type of instrument is best going to fit that need. For example, if you are playing a straight up 50s, 60s, blues, rock, R&B sort of gig, probably better off using something like a Fender Strat Telecaster, possibly a Gibson Les Paul or an ES335 style guitar. Those instruments were designed in that time frame and period, and those would have been used on the recordings, and they're going to help you get that sound a lot better. Likewise, if we're talking about the amps that you would pair with that, it would be probably a Fender or Vox, a small tube amp, low wattage. You're not going to be playing very loud. It's going to be pretty stripped down and straightforward, right? There really weren't any effects pedals until the mid-60s anyway, so it's a pretty straightforward gig. On the other hand, if you are joining a regional touring act and you need to be able to cover sounds from an artist's backlog, you might need a single coil guitar, a humbucker guitar, a semi-hollow guitar, and you might need something like the Fractal Audio Axe Effects, where you can cover music from their 90s albums, their 2000s albums, and their 2010 albums, right? And you need all these different effects and stuff. So the way that I figure out what gear I need to bring for the gig is to simply listen to the music, right? You're going to get the best sense of what you need if you're actually aware of what it is you're going to be doing. So figure out exactly what gear may have been used for the gig that you are going for and see what other people in that genre are using, and you can use that as a starting template to see if maybe you already have something that fits the bill pretty well, or if this might be a good time to go out and pick up that new piece of gear that you've been looking for, but only if it serves the music. It has to serve the music first, otherwise it may not work in the grand scheme of things. Which brings me to my next point, which is choosing the correct method of amplification and monitoring. You have to figure out what the size of the band is, right? What type of gig it is. Is this a one-off? Is it a weekend tour? Is it a long-term position where you'll be using the same setup consistently from week to week, month to month, year to year? If so, figure out what the band is already using. If the band is using traditional amplifiers and backline and speaker monitors, then consider bringing one of your own amplifiers and speaker combos so that you can use stuff you already have that'll match the look of the rest of the band and the sound of the rest of the band, right? If you're filling in and the other musicians are using half stacks, you're probably going to want one as well so that it matches the aesthetic and the look, and it also fits the sound and the way that everything's going to be mic'd up through the PA in front of house. Alternatively, if you're in a cover band situation like me, my band Evolution X uses in-ear monitors, and we don't use on-stage amps unless we want just a little bit of fill or if it's a stage that requires a little bit of additional sound reinforcement. So I don't need to bring an amplifier and cabinet because it just doesn't fit the look of the band. It might not fit on the stage that we play, or it's just too much and it's overkill because I'm already using my in-ears so that I can hear what my guitar tone actually sounds like. So make sure that you keep that in mind. And this is probably a good time to talk about monitoring and hearing protection. All right, if your band is using an in-ear monitoring system where everyone is getting mixes sent to their ears via wireless transmitters and receivers, you have a couple options. You can go with the generic universal molds. These will work in a pinch. They usually sound pretty good. They're gonna take a little bit getting used to, and they may not always have the best sound quality or the best fit because, again, they're generic universal molds. However, since custom molds, which are on the other side of the spectrum, are a very expensive investment, you may want to spend a couple weeks using regular off-the-shelf in-ears just so you can get used to how flat the frequency response is. But if you're going to be doing this for a long time and you have a consistent gig and you have the money for it, your hearing is one of the greatest things you can invest in as a musician. Once you lose your hearing, you're never going to get it back. Right? So if you invest the money in the custom in-ear monitors, you're going to have a nice, perfect custom fit that blocks out a lot of the ambient stage volume, and it's going to allow you to listen to exactly what you need to hear at a lower volume so that you don't lose your hearing or get any fatigue night after night. Likewise, if you're not using an in-ear monitoring system, something like the ear racers, which are frequency dialed earplugs, are probably the best way to go. You want to try to block out anywhere from 20 to 40 decibels of sound. Live music stages typically tend to run anywhere from like 110 to 130 decibels, which can cause permanent hearing damage over long periods of time. So don't just get those cheap foam earplugs, because then you're gonna struggle to hear yourself playing, which means then you're probably gonna turn up the amp louder or adjust the EQ in a very unpleasant way that doesn't work for the rest of the band and the front of house monitor, and it's just gonna be a mess. So get good earplugs where you can still hear the high end and the mid-range information, and something that doesn't muffle the sound so that you can actually hear what's going on stage. Let's talk about road cases. How are you getting your gear from your house to the venue? There's a couple of different ways that you can approach this. The first is just bringing the separate hard cases that you have for your instruments, and maybe getting a pedal board and maybe some custom fit cases for your amps and stuff, and making multiple trips, bringing all these heavy, large, bulky cases. Maybe you have a trailer and it doesn't matter and you don't mind making multiple trips. Maybe you have stage-hands and a road crew, all the more power to you. Maybe you're doing this more as a one-off gig or just some local gigging, so maybe you'll have like a couple single gig bags, or maybe a dual gig bag, something that like Mono creates, and maybe you'll have some soft shell cases for stuff because, you know, you're not going very far. You don't have these massive venues to navigate towards, and you're just bringing all your gear in yourself. Maybe that's fine. My personal preference is to bring the least amount of gear possible, but using the most protection for that gear. So, as you guys already know, I use my Quantum Industries GTX-01 triple guitar case. This is a triple guitar case that also works as a live-in stand, so it eliminates the need for me to bring separate cases and separate guitar stands. It's just this one piece of gear that transports my guitars anywhere in the world, and I don't have to worry about anything happening to them. It's a super solid, reliable case. And then for my pedal board, I either keep it in a backpack if it's a venue where the parking is close and I'm just maybe, you know, walking a block or two and the load-in is right there at the stage, or I'll bring my Pelican 1610 case, which is a weatherproof, fireproof, bomb-proof behemoth of a case. It's heavy and bulky, but trust me when I say it gets the job done. I can fit my entire pedal board rig, which is my Fractal FM3 and an expression pedal, all of my cables, my tech tool case, and I can fit toiletries in there. I can even fit a pillow in there. So for longer treks, something like that would be really useful, especially since some of these venues we play We might have to bring stuff in and out of casino floors or across boardwalks or onto beaches and stuff like that. So having a weatherproof case like the Pelican and the Quantum Industries, it just gives me a little bit more peace of mind so that I know my gear is safe and sound inside of its cases when it's going from place to place. So let's talk about some requirements of the gig that you should consider before you take it. The first and most important, I think, obvious factor is what exactly is the gig? How long is it? How much do you have to prepare for it? Where is it located? Does it conflict with any other gigs that you have? And is it something that you actually want to do? We'll talk about the latter in a minute. But focusing on that first part of it, right? Figure out what your accommodations are, how you're going to get from point A to point B. Is there any travel reimbursement? Is everyone meeting together in a central location and you're going to go together? Is everyone taking separate cars and you're meeting there? Figure out all that stuff beforehand so that you can be well prepared for the day of the show, so you're not freaking out trying to figure out how you're going to get from point A to point B. Also figure out if there are any contracts that you have to sign and that you read them over very thoroughly. Make sure that everything that's been discussed in person, over the phone, or on email is in that document before you sign anything. Also, see if there are any outside requirements. Do you have to post about the show on social media? Do you have to share a show poster? Do you have to pay for tickets ahead of time and sell tickets ahead of time, like a pay-to-play sort of thing? Do you have to do anything else besides learn the music and show up to your rehearsals and the gig? Make sure you take care of all of that beforehand. If you're traveling to different states or countries or continents, do you have your work visas, your passports, your vaccination requirement, if that's a thing, right? These are all things that you need to take care of way ahead of time, hopefully by a couple months, especially if it's a longer trek, because the last thing you want is to show up at TSA, an airport, a country border, and be denied access because you didn't prepare ahead of time. I've seen this happen to so many of my friends and so many national touring bands. Make sure that you have all of your shit together before you leave your native state, home, town, country, etc. And last but not least, I want to talk about the 3 main points that will determine if this gig is the right gig for you. The most important thing, in my opinion, is this something that you want to do, and will it give you experience, right? If this is a gig that you are really passionate about and you really want to do it, or it's going to help elevate you from where you currently are to the next level, that is very important. Usually that's the first thing I look at before I even consider what the gig is do I even want to do this? Because if it's something that you don't even want to do or aren't interested in or don't have the availability to do, then it might not be worth getting more information. And that being said, the second most important thing is the pay. What does the gig pay? There's going to be a point in time in your musical career where you're going to stop wanting to work for free because you're going to have to start paying the bills, right? Now, for some of us, music is our career, right? For me, I make all of my income from music. There are plenty of you out there who just do it for fun or do it as a hobby. Maybe the pay is not important, and that's okay. It doesn't always have to matter, but make sure that you know what you're being compensated, when you're being compensated, and how you're being compensated before you agree to the gig. And that brings me to the final point of this little checklist of 3 things that I have, right, to see if I want to take a gig, and that is, what is the hang like? All right, who are the people that you're going to be working with? How often are you going to be around them? And do you like these people? If you guys look at my older gig vlogs with those amazing decades, Remember Yesterday, Triple Addiction, right? Those were all, either one-off gigs or, shows that we'd play maybe once every other month or so, stuff like that, where the pay really wasn't all that high and the shows tended to be pretty much the same, right? And the experiences would be pretty much the same. But what made those gigs interested and what had me keep on playing these shows and wanting to be with these people is that everyone involved was just a blast to be around. Some of these people are my best friends, people that I've known for over a decade, people that I met in college, people that I've met doing other gigs and we have similar interests, people that we can sit down and just shoot the shit for an hour, between sound check and the downbeat. So if you're around the right people, sometimes that's all that matters about the gig, right? So as long as you consider what the gig is, if you want to do it, if it's going to give you more experience, what the pay is going to be, and what the hang is going to be. If the gig fulfills at least 2 of those 3 requirements, I say it's a good gig. And if it fits all 3 of those, which for me, that's what Evolution X does, and that's a gig that you hold on to. That's the gig that you always give 110% for, because you don't want to give it up or be replaced or want it to end anytime soon. And that's gonna wrap up today's video. I hope that you all got a little bit of insight as to how I prepare for shows and how I make sure that I'm always prepared as best as I can be, so that when I get to the stage at the venue, ready to play, I don't have to worry about anything except having a good time and delivering the best possible performance that I can. I want you all to share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. I read every single one of these, and I love seeing what you all have to say. It really helps build a good community here. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. According to my analytics, 90% of you that watch the video are not subscribed. Come on, you guys can make my day. Take 2 seconds and hit that button and ring that bell so that you know when my next video comes out. Keep on practicing, keep on rocking, and stay safe.